Hey, what's going on? Damon Tay here with PT Biz and the PT Entrepreneur podcast. And man, today we get to talk to Chris Robl, longtime friend of mine, coach within the PT Biz community, somebody that I've seen really go from like a very, a small business to what would be considered by most cases like a very large practice at this point in the Denver and Colorado Springs area. It's been fun to be able to watch you grow and evolve as a business owner. But we want to chat about business, what things are looking like in your clinic, in the area that you're in today, and then from the coaching side, you work with a number of clinics that are clients of ours, and really seeing what's happening with them on an ongoing basis. Always really interesting to see trends as they are kind of grouped together, and you can kind of skate where the puck is going. We want to share some of that with people today as well. So, Chris, first of all, man, thanks so much for your time. I know it's a little bit earlier there. What is it, a 2 hour difference, right?
Yeah, it's 2 hours. It's 7:30.
So kids just are off today, right? And or that's tomorrow. School starts.
Yeah. Tomorrow school is underway. Summer is over.
Yeah, we started back the July 29th, which is super early, right? I think for most people it's mid-August, but I can tell you when my kids get back into school, I become far more effective. Like I am managing my time better. It's more quiet here. It's great. Like no offense to my kids. I love hanging out with them, but dude, when it's time for them to get back into school, like I know I'm going to be clicking on all cylinders again.
Yeah, I feel that for sure. I'm ready.
Yeah. Well, dude, tell me this. Like, so, whatever, everybody that listens to this pretty much is a physical therapist. And, getting into the profession for most of us, we all have our own path, usually goes through our own injuries or we get exposed to it somehow. But becoming a business owner, usually that happens number two ways. So you're like, one, you're inherently always interested in it and you want to do that from the get-go. Or two, you just get so frustrated that you have to try to do your own thing. So I would love to know, like, how did you end up taking the path where you deviated to then start your own clinic?
Yeah, I think I was the latter, Danny. I grew up as an entrepreneur. I was selling t-shirts in college and high
Yeah.
school, and there was just always some sort of business venture that I found myself in. So when I graduated PT school in 2011, I moved out here and started working for this practice that I found on Craigslist. And about 6 months later, they offered me partnership in the business. And so 6 months in, you're new PT director and now owner of a practice. And I did that for about 6 years, and I sold that practice after 6 years. And it just became one of those mills where we were turning them, and it was a turn them and burn them type of clinic. And I didn't want to do that anymore. And I wanted something different. So sold that, waited a 2-year non-compete. And that's when we started Physio Room in 2018. So
So
I've owned a practice for 14 years now.
yeah, tell me about okay. First of all, I don't think anybody's finding employment on Craigslist too much anymore. Maybe they are, but like, so you find a place to work on Craigslist, and within 6 months they offer you an opportunity to partner in clinics. Now, this was in the clinic that you were working in, or this was like within a group of clinics. Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, so Denver is saturated, and with PTs, that is, and so you don't have to pay the PTs all that much. So I graduated in 2011, and I was making, I think, $62,000 as a physical therapist.
Yeah.
And I realized once my student loans kicked in that I wasn't making enough money. And so that was about the time I was looking for other jobs. And so I was going to go down to Roswell, New Mexico and take this director position down there. They were going to give me a huge sign-on bonus. And I went back to my current company. I said, hey, thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. I love working here. And they counter offered that, and they offered me partnership in the company at that moment.
Wow. So how did that go with you helping them kind of grow clinics over the next few years? So were you a partner in each additional clinic that were started up? Was that basically like a minority, share, and then there was obviously like a bigger company that it was like a holdco for everything? Like what did the nuts and bolts look like? And was it an actually pretty decent deal for you, or was it actually a bad deal at the time?
It was a good deal. And I say that now because I look back and I learned so much. The two guys that I worked for were brilliant in many, many ways. And I also learned what not to do
Right.
in many, many ways. So it was a great deal. I made good money. I was able to sell my shares and make a little bit of money on that exit. Um, and I think that was a learning moment for me because I was only there for 6 months. I didn't really know these people. And you never really want to get married to someone that you only know for a few months, because ultimately it ended up in a business divorce. And
Right.
uh, along that way, I was supposed to have first right of refusal on any additional clinics. And we had many additional clinics. We grew from two to, I think, 14 clinics in the time that I was there.
Wow.
And I was cut out of those additional clinics. So that is ultimately what led to my departure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is my experience in business. There seems to be, and it's not always the case, but senior people that are like more senior in business, they have more experience. They they just tend to have more preferential, setups versus someone that's more junior. And you may not even know what you're getting yourself into. You're just excited to have the opportunity, which in some ways is like, it's not a bad thing. Like, think about how much you learned and how much you were able to like experience that you would have never done if you'd have gone and taken this job in Roswell, right? So like, it's in one way it's like fantastic. In another way, looking back on it, you probably know so much more that you would have structured things differently and all that. So these were all in network. These are, I'm assuming, like higher volume clinics, right? So what was like the average daily patient caseload?
Yeah, I was probably doing at least 20 visits a day. I think my all time high was right around 130 for the week.
Yeah, it's a
Um,
lot.
and so, yeah, it was mostly 30-minute treats, but then we started double booking. And if that were to happen, yeah, we would see close to 115 on average, probably.
Yeah, yeah. How have you seen reimbursement change to some degree? Because now, and we can kind of talk about the nuts and bolts of Physio Room, but there's a hybrid component to it. But have you seen big changes that you've noticed with reimbursement compared to what you were seeing with this first clinic group?
Well, I mean, reimbursement for Physio Room being a network is a little different because we have cherry picked just a few of the insurances that we used to see. But like when you take all the insurances in Colorado, I think it's probably one of the least reimbursed states in the country. I think Aetna will, it's around $43 a visit. Blue
That's
Cross is capped at
crazy.
like 65, 70. It's
Yeah,
so you just can't take those unless you're double booking those. It's just
yeah.
not a it's not feasible.
Yeah. So what insurances make sense for Physio Room? As far as the hybrid approach that you guys are running.
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of looked at it, and if I can do that $100 and above, I said I would do it. I have a passion for the older folks. I just enjoyed working with them, and so it was a way to kind of treat the people that I wanted to treat, and it was just really fun. But yeah, right now we are just taking Medicare and Tricare because they're both over $100, and then we do some MVA accidents. There's a third party finance company that will pay us on immediately, so we don't have to wait the 1, 2, 3 years out to
Yeah.
collect on those liens. So yeah, those are probably the three like in network style where we have to document, ICD-10 codes and all of that, CPT
Yeah.
codes.
The Medicare thing is interesting. I always felt I agree with you. I didn't actually treat older population in the military at all. Because it was all basically 18 to maybe 35-year-old males. Occasionally I'd have somebody a little bit older than that. And I would also have some females, but I was primarily in like an infantry division. So it's like young men only. Right. Which gets kind of boring after a while versus having some variance. But, having a chance to work in a high volume clinic as an intern when I was in school, it was heavy Medicare population. Right. And I actually really did enjoy working with an older population if you're willing to like listen to them. And they're also like really thankful people. Like I remember at Christmas, just the insane amount of baked goods that we would have that would show up from people that we hadn't even like worked with in months or sometimes years, and they just would pop in and drop off a bundt cake. Like there's some really like fun elements of that. So I could see how that hybrid variation works really well. What about the volume side of that though? Because like if you look at your Medicare population percentage that makes up schedules, like what's that roughly making up of the, I think you said you had a PR of 1,000 visits in last month, which is awesome. But of those 1,000, like how many of those are Medicare visits?
Yeah, we are definitely playing a little bit different game in that regards. We are trying to keep that payer mix at about 75% cash
Yeah.
and 25% those in network. As we do that, that keeps my cost per visit, you know, closer to that $200 mark, but it's not there, and so it's still a struggle. Even with adding 1,000 visits a month, it's still that volume. You have to do a lot of volume to make up that gap. And if so, we're at $180 a visit right now, and that's just not enough. So we got to keep inching our way up. And I think the beauty of hybrid, I think the beauty of the system that we're running is I can bring on new clinicians. I can have this safety net for them, and they can start to build their schedule. They can start to build their niche, their audience. And then the goal, the idea is that they continue to build their niche audience. They continue to shift into the cash model where they have a higher cost per visit. I can pay them more. And then that allows me to hire the next new one in which they get the safety net. Where it becomes a problem is when that clinician doesn't make that leap and doesn't develop that niche and that skill set, and they stay in the insurance side. And now that safety net becomes a parachute and it just slows them down.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you bring up a good point of the average visit rate. What we're seeing, yeah, roughly that $200 mark is where people need to be. But if you're able to double book somebody like a lot of clinics would do, and they're able to have, two people in there in the hour, then to get to that point is easier than obviously if you're treating one to one the way that you have the clinic set up. So part of it is that, but the volume side of it and being able to acquire clients like that has its advantages as well. And you're right on the front end with like newer grads. There's not as high of expectations per se of outcomes, and then with Tricare, it's interesting being in Colorado Springs, big military area. Have you found that insurance in particular is it's a good one to take, or is it a huge pain in the ass to deal with? Having to deal with obviously government contracts of any sort can have its own sort of challenges.
I have found Medicare and Tricare to be both very straightforward. They have their rules, they have their hoops. As long as you understand them and you jump through them at the right times, like it is a very easily manageable system. Whereas like when you have a United Healthcare managed by Optum,
Yeah.
now all of a sudden like they start making up rules like randomly, and you're like, well, this doesn't make any sense. Why does this person get 9 visits and this person get 3 visits? It's just crazy. So yeah, it seems to be very straightforward and manageable.
Yeah. Well, I think that from what I've seen, that seems to be the combination that, well, it kind of works best, but it also, it depends on the state, right? Like I've seen certain states like Washington State, for instance. I mean, I've seen contracts where people are getting, 150 to $200 a visit, with one-on-one. Now, if that was the case, I would have taken insurance in my clinic, like immediately, like it's just not happening in Georgia for us to be anywhere near that, at the size clinic that we were. So tell me a little bit about the setup now. So your staff, like what do their schedules typically look like on a, daily kind of weekly basis? Like what's their volume at? And we know the payer mix. So it's obviously a 75% roughly cash is kind of where you're at.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the work life balance that everybody's chasing, and I think we do a pretty good job of giving that opportunity to our providers. We're 32 visits available a week. That's the requirement to be full time, and 90% arrival rate. We expect our providers to be around 28 visits a week. That's kind of the math that we use to calculate salaries and compensation packages. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's that's roughly, kind of what we've seen as well. And I think that 32 is really, I mean, that is very achievable. And I've found people that come out of school that have not worked in a higher volume clinic like you have. The perspective is challenging in some ways because, they may be like, well, that's a lot of, visits, right? It's a lot of volume. And you're like, dude, I've seen that many in a day before, like it's relative in comparison to your experience. How have you found with like, you're good, dude, family. I get it. Families around the ability for them to actually like appreciate that. Have you found that clinicians that are a bit older and have actually worked in a high volume clinic, they're like, this is nice. This is like a chill job that I can do for a while versus like, have you had any struggles with newer grads that think it's like incredibly hard?
I don't want to sound like the old guy, Danny, but I don't feel like they work as hard as they used to. So yeah, I tend to look for a little bit seasoned clinician at this point because they've kind of been through the rat race. They've been burned by the system a little bit, and they truly appreciate the opportunity that we're giving them. Whereas some of the younger, newer grads, there's I don't know, there's just like that sense of entitlement, and it's harder to show them that the quality of life and that the quality of care that we're offering is worth it, and they
Yeah.
just don't see it. They just see it as a job, and it's they don't appreciate it as much as I wish they would.
I think it's just hard to have that perspective. I mean, that's kind of what I've noticed too, even with new grads that we've hired that, like we've had people we've hired and they're like, dude, I feel like I'm getting burned out. Or like, you've been in the job for 6 months. Like you've been out of school for a year, like, or less. Maybe you picked the wrong career field. Like, I think it's more of a, like if you feel like what we're doing is killing you, then, maybe it's just you picked the wrong profession. And that's a bummer to hear after you just spent 7 years, getting a degree. And I would agree. I find that once people have some perspective for like what high volume feels like, and it's not even just the volume, it's literally the ability to go a little bit deeper with people and generate, like an actual relationship, build trust, help them, really create these lifelong changes. That's really personally rewarding. And when you're unable to do that because you feel more like a waiter and you're bouncing around a clinic, and then all of a sudden you get to go back to a bit more of a pure relationship, I find that the people that really want to do that tend to be the clinicians that really value their outcomes. They take a lot of pride in those. And that's, at the end of the day, who we want to hire for the most part.
100%. 100%. And it's one of those things where we look for those folk that have like these passions, because right, if you do what you love, you don't ever work a day in your life. And when we can invest in those folk, I got one guy right now, and he does bike fits for us. He has
Yeah.
people driving from Steamboat, Salida,
Wow.
like 3-4 hours away just to come
Yeah.
see this guy for bike fits. And we've invested in him, and it was a lot of money. And but he's been with me for 4 years, and he's solid. He's consistent, and I think that's part of it. Is if you invest in your people, they're happy to come to work. And that's been a big culture shift from maybe the previous place that I was at to where we are now.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about the sort of team setup of Physio Room now. So, like, how many clinicians do you have? Who's in leadership positions? Like, kind of what does that org chart look like?
Oh, it's far bigger than I ever imagined. That's for sure. We have 19, 20 people at this point, 16 clinicians, some front office, and then the countless number of back end people from social media to accounting and all the supplementary folk that it takes to run a business. So, but in house on day to day operations, we have 16 providers, probably which of there's probably 11 full time employees. So we have a few part time, but mostly full. Um, we have three main locations and one small satellite location at a golf club. So four total clinics. And so the three main locations each have a clinic director. And so each clinic director is in our leadership team. And then we have our front desk operations officer, and she is a part of the leadership team. So we have uh, five people on the leadership team at this point. and 3 clinic directors.
So your front desk leadership. So is that centralized because of the different locations you have, or do you have like a forward-facing person at each individual location minus the satellite office, and then you have like a centralized leadership person for that? Because like that seems to me to be, it can go both ways in regards to what I've seen work. I've seen some people try to really be lean, and other people they lean into that and they want to invest in their client experience as there's somebody kind of spearheading that. So how are you guys running that?
Yeah, this is a passion project of mine for sure. I think one of our most important positions is that front desk position. So I lean very heavily into the front desk position, and I pay them very well. And so they take all my calls. They are the client experience specialist. That is their title. And when we run ads for that position, it's client experience specialist and sales. So they do both. And I think it really is helpful when we put a provider there at each location. They are there to help with the culture in that clinic. You see culture go up because they're helping, they hear stuff, they report back. You can help solve problems that you didn't even know that you had, from internally and externally, from clients and from providers. They're helping me solve problems. And so I love having a front desk at each location. It has been really helpful, and we get such great feedback from all the clients that we have, and it does help grow the clinic. We didn't have one in Colorado Springs recently, and we just hired a young lady down there, and she's only working part time. But even her part time schedule in Colorado Springs, you're starting to see the graph go up. You're starting to see the number of visits go up because people go out, they chat with her, and then they book out their plan of care for the entirety. They don't just do
Right.
this 1 week at a time and then fall off. And so now they're starting to become more consistent, stability in the schedules. And to me, that's worth its weight in gold. I will pay that person, $20, $30 an hour to create these sales that I would have lost otherwise.
Yeah. How have you found with fragmenting the sales inbound? So obviously it's like each location, there's somebody that's running the front desk. They're having those conversations. Have you found that there's a significant difference between conversion percentages with different front desk that you have? Are they relatively similar? What's the benchmark that you want to see for somebody in that position? Because you're obviously positioning it as a sales position as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is one of those positions where you hire people and you don't hire positions. And so with the people that we've brought in, they're very warm, they're very genuine, they truly care. And I tell them that, like, we're not selling anything on the front desk. We're just listening to the problems that these people have and offering solutions. And you guys do that. If you believe in the product that we serve, you can sell this and you don't have to be salesy. And so I really have a great lead with Alex at that position, and she trains everybody how to do it. And I don't see a huge difference between clinic to clinic on that conversion. Now, as you grow, you see a decrease in your conversions because not everybody is a really hot lead. You start getting more cold leads from Google. You start getting more cold leads from maybe some paid ads that you do. And so we do see probably a 60% conversion on some of those colder ones, but I would venture to say on those hot leads, that's still close to that 80% marker that we used to have.
Yeah, yeah. That and there's it's so interesting because there's so many different ways to look at that in terms of that's obviously a big you know pain point, or it's a really big drop off point for some people, and it can make or break obviously like your clinic conversions. But at the same time, like the office manager that we hired at Least Potential, she's still there, fantastic, way better in the office than on the phone. And what we found with her was like people will come back just to talk to her. People will come back just because they'll send a friend who maybe is as an injury, but they're like more than anything, they're like, well, you got to just go talk to Claire for a second. Like she's awesome. Like, and she's there almost every single day. And that customer experience side of things is so valuable that in a way, like the clinicians now take the calls. because they convert at such a higher rate. But she's triaging those. So like what we found, and this is why it's interesting. There's just different ways to do this. Where it's like, well, if this is like a shoe in, cool. Then you go ahead and you get them set up, and that's sort of the approach. But if it's harder, or something that you feel like you can't answer, or something that's better for a clinician to answer, then you set a call on that call for them to talk to one of the docs, and then they convert a much higher percentage because there's obviously a lot more authority around that. But figuring that out took some time, and originally we didn't want her to do that. And we saw conversions go down, which is hard to watch when hey, if I could talk to who knows how many people and I'll convert 90% of them, whatever. So for what you're doing at scale, what have you found internally with your own training? This like the 80-20 of somebody really what they need to focus on for that position. Like what are the 20% of things that really get them to that 80% benchmark where they're a asset to the clinic and not a liability anymore?
Oh man, that's really hard. And I think I would just take a step back and go from the higher level and say it's the mindset, right? And that's why we're all in the PT biz community, or at least that's why I've stayed in the PT biz community is the mindset, right? And your mindset is what drives culture, and your culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I think that's the thing is like everybody around the clinic is helping support that front desk, and they're giving her the mindset, and they're breeding this culture that thrives on itself. And it's taken me a long time to see that, but you always read in the leadership books like, oh, once you get a good culture, people will hold each other accountable. And I'm starting to see that for the first time in 14 years, where like this ecosystem is building on itself and growing. And we have such a great team. So I feel like as long as we keep making those culture fit type hires and they're willing to grow and develop with us, that our team and our ecosystem will be that 20% that gives me the 80%.
Dude, no doubt. I feel like every time I've ever hired, it's so funny. There's different opinions on this, but like I look for culture over anything else. There's very few skills that I feel like I can't help somebody learn or train, or that we can help improve. But the culture fit side is so important. On the same side, like you, I think you have to be careful as well that you're not just bringing people in that you that only view the world the same way that you do, right? Especially as your team gets bigger, because what you're talking about is the ability to, yes, to hold standards, but also I think it's an echo chamber if everybody literally thinks exactly the same way and there's not room to hear other people's opinions. So there is a balance there between we have a culture of excellence, but also we have a culture of openness in terms of being able to express how you feel about something and being taken as a professional, instead of like I was a part of a culture in the military that was very top down. It's like you're my boss's boss, so I got to do what you say, and you don't really care what I have to say because it doesn't matter at the end of the day. And that's not necessarily a good place to work either. So how would you describe the culture that you have at Physio Room? Because it sounds like it's really evolved over the last decade plus.
Yeah. Well, I think you have to embrace it with, humility, right? And being humble, because I just got called out this week on something, and it stung a little bit.
Yeah.
But that's part of the culture. I want to get better. And I know that I have someone else on my leadership team that has an entirely different perspective than me. And maybe they see the world different than I do, which is great because she sees the world different and she's doing things different and she's really good. And I really respect this person. And so when you get all these different perspectives, it really helps round out that system. And so I enjoy that. But yeah, we lean into those core values heavily with client centric, go further together, all of our core values that we have.
I think the humility side is challenging it's the hardest part, honestly, when you have to realize that like you're either doing something not as well as you should, or you don't know something as well as you should, or maybe there's a better way that's not the way that you came up with, right? Like that is that's really hard but also important to check those things and have a culture where people are willing to tell you what they think, because if not, then they're scared that they're going to get whatever, yelled at in front of everybody, or you're gonna make them feel like an idiot or dismiss them or whatever. And I think that's like a silent culture killer. Do you have opportunities where people can be a part of planning and goal setting, or is that more leadership and then that disseminates down? Like, how are you overall kind of setting the tone for like the year or the quarters within Physio Room at this point?
Oh yeah, I think this is a shock to a lot of people. We just hired a director from a clinic across town, and she's coming in, and I'm giving her permission to give feedback, take ownership of certain projects, and she's like, "Wait a second. Normally, I'd get in trouble if I had too many ideas." And I I give our people the autonomy and the power to make some decisions. Now it's my job, right, to set the boundaries and to like create the sidelines, but they're the ones running the game. They're the ones playing in the trenches, and they have that power, and I want that feedback because I'm not in the day to day all the time, so I don't know what problems need to be solved, and um, they have to bring that in. So we have our weekly team meetings, right? And so we do these discussions where we identify the problem and we discuss it, we solve it, whatever. And we come up with that on the weekly basis, and we talk about what's that way we're all on the same page. And then we our quarterly meetings with the leadership team, we set those rocks, right? And we disseminate that down and say, hey, this is our focus. We're going to do X, Y, and Z for marketing, sales. We're going to try and increase cost per visit. These are the strategies that we're going to execute for the next 90 days. This is our focus. What problems do we have? What solutions can we come up with like to achieve these goals? And we just talk about that in 90-day sprints.
Yeah. That seems to work really well in terms of getting everybody on the same page. I feel like for you now that you're coaching and have been for a while, it's a different perspective that we get a chance to take to our businesses now that we are mentoring other people with theirs. Like, I feel like when I became a clinical mentor and I started teaching continuing education courses, I became a far better clinician because of that, because I had to be able to educate people in a way, like educating a group of people is so much harder than like one to one. But if you can, even if you can go to one, it makes you better as a clinician because you've had to clarify your frameworks. You have to clarify your rationale for why you're doing that. Taking on a student and them asking you a billion why questions of why you're doing things. It can't just be like, well, because that's just the way it works. Like, that's not a good answer. You have to be able to clarify that. So for you now as a coach, how has that helped you with your own business? And in what ways has that been really beneficial?
I would probably say that I've learned more over the last 1 to 2 years coaching than I have in the previous, 10, 11 years of ownership. It is just like you said, you get at a very granular level and you see patterns, just like you see patterns in PT. I would say that the one big pattern that I have noticed from the members in the mastermind and reflected in myself is I wasn't thinking big enough
Mm-hmm.
with my goals. I wasn't thinking big enough for my goals for my team. And I think that's probably one of the biggest mistakes that I see is like people don't want to pay their top talent very much. And I feel like if you set the expectations and you create this black and white like trajectory for your clinicians to make as much money as they possibly can, that is the success of the business. And too many times we see these owners try to be like, oh, well, I can't pay them very much. I can't pay them. I'm like, well, how can you? Let's come up with that solution on how we can and not why we can't. And that is probably something that I'm working on myself is creating these. I hate to say corporate ladders, but having these milestones and these stepping stones to get to big money for these
Yeah,
providers.
that's a great point. I agree. I think that setting a goal, any kind of goal, it's very easy for us to want to set achievable goal because it feels good to like check a box to say, yeah, great, we hit our numbers this year, right? But if you set these like tiny growth goals or these like very achievable goals, it's not very helpful versus I'd rather somebody set a much harder stretch goal and get halfway there and they're still twice as far as they were if they set these like really, really tiny goals. The flip side of that, what you're talking about on the compensation side is a challenging problem. I think it's actually one of the bigger problems that people are facing right now because the 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 actual compensation, it needs to be tied to revenue in the business. And for a lot of these businesses, they still are undercharging. They're still like not adding in things that are revenue producing that maybe aren't just visits. And their revenue per provider is still too low. Now, when you scale and you have 15 providers like you do, it changes it because you've now added volume to the mix. Versus if you have like one or two people, that's where it gets really hard. So for an owner to go through that stage to then get to the point where they can then bring on a third, fourth, fifth provider and have really like a scale through the volume of providers that they have, like they got to get through the trenches of that really shitty profit stage, which sucks. It's literally like profit purgatory. It's the worst place to be. So but when you're talking to these people about, hey, you got to compensate your people well, like what is it that there is resonating with them? Because I think that this is one of the harder things that entrepreneurs have to come to the conclusion of, is that you can't make the same mistake that's being made in these high volume clinics where they're paying people like shit and they're obviously getting burnt out and frustrated. Like, we want to create a better model, but at the same time, it's scary when you have very little profit.
Yeah, and I think that's where we currently are, is trying to challenge the status quo. And what got us here isn't going to get us to the next level. And um, I'm reading this book called the Science of Scaling right now, and I just keep going back to this. Like, we'll set a goal that just seems so unrealistic, and put a time frame on it that just seems so unrealistic, and you're going to grow fast. And I saw that in the very beginning of Physio Room. Like, we grew, like we doubled. We went from 250 to 500, 500 to a million to we're on track for 1.7. It's crazy. And when you get stagnant, you don't grow. And I think that's probably where we're at with the industry of cash PT right now. Are the cash packages the way that we're going? Is it something else? Can we do these bolt on and have this, whatever you call it, time-based offer or whatever it is? And I think that's ultimately where I'm at right now with my clinic director. She wants to make really, really big money, but you can only do two things. You can only charge more per visit, or you can see more visits. And she doesn't want to see any more visits. So there's only one solution, and we just have to make more money per visit. And so coming up with those strategies that feel genuine, authentic, and true to her, and something that she can really own is probably the strategy that we're moving towards at the moment.
Yeah, and there's a lot of options outside of visits, just traditional visits per se, but and sometimes they align with the clinic niche, that you have. Sometimes they do not. And the tried and true sort of method is, it's like any service-based provider. I mean, if you are a lawyer, an accountant, an engineer, like there's like billable work, right? That they have, and then that's that times their billable rate, and that's what they pay people. Like, for instance, my buddy who presented in Atlanta, John Yonker, he's a veterinarian, and he does veterinary business consulting at this point. He's a partner in another practice here in Georgia still, and the compensation model that we were talking about last week, he's in my ruck group, and I was walking with him that morning, and he was like, "Yeah, man, we pay 22% of revenue generated to the provider." And I was like, "Oh, that seems low, right?" He goes, "Yeah, but a provider at our clinic will do about $1 million in work on an annual basis, right?" Now, that's not happening for a physical therapist. Like, it's no chance, right? So yeah, a vet can make $250,000, whatever range. And if they're super productive, like, it can be even higher than that. Versus for us, like, if we did 22% of what somebody's generating, I mean, they're going to make like $55,000, so it's, if it's even a pretty efficient clinic. So the model is just not the same. Right. And that's where it's challenging, because I do think the per provider revenue is really the factor that has to be able to change. And it may or may not just be tied straight to visits. And that's where it is fun in some ways to try to work through some of these, but also challenging because changing anything in a business is always like really, is difficult for people to do. So I don't know, man. I'd love to know what you think as far as like, on a 30,000 foot view, right? Like you're a pilot, you fly around and you see things from different perspective. What do you see as like biggest opportunities within this space, over the next, let's call it 5 years?
Oh, that's such a great question. People are excited about what we're doing. There's no AI that's going to reproduce the relationships in the manual
So
and
true.
some of that. I mean, maybe some clinical decision making on exercise prescription, perhaps with some apps. But yeah, I would say that there is that. It has to be the combo of integrating some AI into the practice and creating these platforms where I can treat this person in clinic, but then they're still getting a program that they can follow on the monthly basis. I think that there is these products that we will be able to sell, and it's not just selling visits. I think that's probably what is going to happen, because you're going to see a lot of those virtual PT, and the weakness with virtual PT is there's just no in person and there's no deep relationship. So I think when you combine the two, there's that, and then business is hard, right?
Sure.
There's no doubt about it. Like owning a business seems to be sexy, and it is the furthest thing from being sexy. It is hard, it's gritty, it is not sexy. But a lot of people want to open up businesses, and some of them aren't going to be cut out for it. And I think there's opportunities to then bring those people into for the businesses that learn the systems, learn how to scale and learn how to grow and have good leadership. I think there is opportunity, and we've seen it a couple of times already. I've been approached by other providers in our current area that want to sell. And I'm like, all right, well, what does mergers and acquisitions look like? What exactly are you buying? What's that worth? But I think there's going to be a lot of these solo 1-2 micro clinic PT practices that you can start to grow and scale with that, because the traditional model of PT, we all know that's a dying breed, and what we're doing is the next wave, but not everybody's cut out to do it.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And the consolidation is just a matter of time. I mean, because for instance, you're right. Like if somebody starts a clinic, if you want to start a clinic and you want to be, you want it to be a lifestyle business, you want to replace your salary working somewhere else and more. Like that's very possible if you just want to stay small. Uh, but that's not a real business, right? You just created another job for yourself, which that might be what you want, and there's nothing wrong with that because that might be exactly what you makes you happy and is the right fit for your family. The the next step though for a lot of people is where I see a lot of people get sideswiped by business. And that's when they actually have to like take on more overhead, their profit margins drop, they get really scared because they have been able to bootstrap everything. And if they don't push past that first, second, and get to that third provider, then they end up realizing that this is a really bad business to own unless you are going to actually like grow a slightly bigger business than that. And that puts you in a far more stable position. Well, for a lot of people, that stage, they underestimate how challenging that is. And when they're there, now all of a sudden they start looking backwards and saying, wow, that wasn't so bad where, I just was in a little office and it was just me and I didn't have any employees or any overhead, which is not that is not necessarily the mentality that you can have to run a business. Like you just can't. You got to be like head down, you're into it, like you're going forward until you hit these certain sizes that you're at. But for a lot of people, they're going to realize maybe I'm not cut out for business. And somebody like yourself literally might be able to say, cool, now you know what you don't want. Come on over here, join our team. And that's a great person that can be a fantastic entrepreneur. Maybe that's a far better fit for them. And they didn't know until they experienced that for themselves. So I feel like we're going to see a lot of that. These really small clinics, and then we're going to see bigger clinics really be able to systemize, consolidate, and give better opportunities while still not killing people with volume. And it's going to happen. I think it'll be fragmented, regionally, but potentially on a bigger scale. I think that's something that will eventually happen. I mean, it happened in network clinics. It happened with almost any healthcare group that you look at. And on the AI side, I think you're totally right, dude. People, I think, are going to want human like connection more and more, because there's going to be so much non-human connection. And the in-person side of your body being taken care of somebody else who has a body is a very like trustworthy thing, right? Versus even, I don't know, at the stages where we get to a point where there's robots, like I'm not going to have a robot dry needling my neck anytime soon, or like manipulating my back, or like I want to talk to another person as well that I can connect with. I think that is a very, very valuable part of our profession that is not going anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Dude, let's end with this. What's next for Physio Room? What do you guys got going on? Like, what are you working on? What's a cool project that you can shout out? And also, if somebody's interested in joining the team, what does that look like for people you're looking for? What's the buy box for them to say, like, this is perfect for a Physio Room team member?
Yeah. Yeah. We're always hiring. We've got a contact us form on the website, and join our team right there. You can follow all those links and instructions. But yeah, I mean, next for Physio Room is we're buying a building. We're staying in the current space that we're at, and we're buying it, and we're expanding the gym. We're going to be building out a little bit more of the pelvic side of Physio Room, and we've got a great clinician that is going to help us lead that. So I'm really excited about the growth opportunities in the Denver South Metro market, and then big time growth happening down in Colorado Springs. We've got one of the coolest clinics I've ever been in. You walk out the back of the CrossFit gym that we just took over. You got Pikes Peak right there. The view is just spectacular.
Cool.
And the growth opportunity down there is significant. So yeah, we're really excited about the growth, and our team is growing, and the culture is great. So yeah, we're really excited about the opportunities ahead.
Well, where can people go if they're interested in learning more about Physio Rooms? Where can we point them?
Yeah, we're both on all the socials at Physio Room CO, and then our website is physioroomco.com, and you can reach me at chris@physioroomco.com. So if you have any questions, happy to answer anything and just pass it forward.
Sweet. I appreciate it, man. And Chris, so fun to highlight what you're doing, guys. Chris is one of our awesome coaches. It's just so fun to be able to work with people as talented as you, even internally, as you're helping our community, continue to grow and evolve. And it's just fun to be able to share what you're doing with your own clinics, right? Because oftentimes you're talking to everybody else about theirs. Anyway, man, I appreciate you catching up with me today. And as always, hey, thank you so much for watching and listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.